What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the 6th episode in Season 2 of HBO's hit TV show, House of the Dragon. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to watching the episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. So this episode begins with the Lannister army arriving at the Golden Tooth, and Lord Jason Lannister is greeted by Lord Humphrey Lefford, who welcomes him to his castle before informing him that he has 500 fighting men to add to Lord Jason's army. Now, Lord Jason tells him that he brings 1,000 knights of his own and 7 times as many archers and men-at-arms, that by the time they finish with the Riverland scum, that the Red Fork will have earned its name. Lord Humphrey tells Lord Jason that they are ready to march at his command and supposes that they will make for Harrenhal at once. Now, Lord Jason tells Lord Humphrey to send a raven to King's Landing, informing his brother, Sir Tywin, that they are indeed ready to march as soon as Prince Aemon is able to join them on Vhagar. Lord Humphrey asks what the army will do until the prince makes his answer known, and Lord Jason tells him that his men have had a long march and are eager to enjoy the hospitality of his keep. So here we see that the Lannister army has indeed arrived pretty much on the border of the Westerlands and the Riverlands. The Golden Tooth sits on the River Road at the edge of the Westerlands if you've ever seen a detailed map of Westeros. And Lord Jason wants to make sure, no doubt, that his army has the protection of a dragon if he was to move further. And I think this is just a caution, as he surely knows that Daemon has already taken Harrenhal and that he could possibly be anywhere in the Riverlands at this point. Now, from there, we see Prince Aemon at the Green Council crumbling the message as he appears enraged by its sentiment. He asks Sir Tywin if the Lannisters are so diminished that they cannot march from the Tooth to Harrenhal without an escort. Now, Sir Tywin explains that there is a large dragon in the Riverlands. Aemon reminds Sir Tywin that he is the Prince Regent, not a dog to be called to heel. He goes on to tell Sir Tywin that he needs to tell his brother that if he does not deliver his host to Harrenhal with haste, that Daemon's dragon will be the least of his worries. Now, Alicent attempts to placate her son, but he interrupts, telling Sir Tywin that he wishes to make an alliance with the Triarchy, that he will get them to come in and deal with the Sea Snake's blockade. You know, the blockade that's stopping all the food from coming in. And Sir Tywin warns Aemon not to treat with the free cities, that the captains of their ships are dangerous mercenaries, that they're little more than pirates. Now, Aemon explains that their ships are but a stone's throw away across the narrow sea, and that Lannister and Hightower ships will take months to arrive. He believes that the Triarchy will delight in harassing the Sea Snake once more, weakening his blockade while their true allies continue to make their way east. Now, Alicent explains to Aemon that the Triarchy may play at accepting terms, but that they are not to be trusted. She then asks Grand Maester Orwell what has come of their letters to the Greyjoys, and Grand Maester Orwell tells her that they have been to no avail. Now, Lord Wilde remarks that the Red Kraken waits, seeking his best advantage, but that they may draw him in with honey if it comes to it, perhaps with an offer of marriage to Alicent, the Dowager Queen. And Alicent gets upset and explains that that will absolutely be out of the question. And Lord Wilde just kind of looks at her, sitting next to Sir Criston, as he smirks and responds, "Alas." Now, Sir Criston remarks that Alicent speaks wisely, going on to explain that even if the blockade could be broken, if they would invite alien raiders into their waters so close to King's Landing. Now, Aemon tells Sir Criston that it's time he set out for Harrenhal. Now, Sir Criston explains that if Daemon were to prevail in the Riverlands, that he no longer has the numbers to challenge him, reminding Aemon that they lost much at Rook's Rest. Now, Aemon reminds Sir Criston that the longer they wait, the greater the chance that he will indeed prevail. Aemon goes on to explain that the Lannister army will attack from the west, and that Sir Kristen and his men will attack from the east, forcing Daemon and the Riverlands army to fight on two fronts. Sir Kristen advises that they should wait on the Hightower host and set out in good time. Now, Aemon explains that there is no time, that it's a fortnight's march to Harrenhal, and that they must strike before Daemon's army is raised. Sir Kristen asks Aemon of his own doings, and Aemon tells Sir Kristen that he will fly out to meet them when the time is ripe, that his uncle is a challenge that he welcomes if he would dare face him. And there's a lengthy silence before Aemon remarks, "I see we are all agreed," and the council is adjourned. But as everyone is exiting the room, Aemon asks to speak with his mother alone. And once Aemon and his mom are alone, he asks her of her place on the council. She reminds Aemon that she represented his father during the last years of his life and that she has been a counselor to his brother. Aemon remarks that she has been capably so, but that his father is dead and that Aegon is, incapacitated. He goes on to remark that she has served the realm well in its time of need, but that time of need has ended, and that she is no longer obliged. Now, she explains that it's not a matter of obligation, but that voices of temperance are needed. Now, Aegon explains to her that he feels like he has enough temperate voices on the council already. Alicent goes on to state to Aemon that he has the impetuousness of youth and its arrogance, neither of which is desired in a king. Aemon then officially releases her from her seat, claiming that he is sure that she would be pleased to return to more domestic pursuits. Alicent then pauses, and she looks down at her son, who is still seated in his chair, and she gently touches his face, asking if the indignities of his childhood have not yet been sufficiently avenged. He stares back up at her, grabbing her hand and eventually removing it from his face as he stands from his seated position and finally exits the room, leaving his mother standing there, quite despondent. So, he finally kicked his mom off the Green Council. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know how long it was going to take. I figured it might not happen to the end of the season, but here we are. Like I said, I knew this was coming, and I knew Alicent was trying to fight it as hard as she could, but this has been in the making for quite some time. Aemon was teased, ignored, and mistreated his whole life by Viserys, by Rhaenyra, not directly, but certainly indirectly, by Daemon, of course, by association to Rhaenyra, and most definitely by her and Daemon's children. And look, this is the price. Eventually the bill comes due. Aemon hates the world and everyone in it, essentially. And the little slights that he's been made to endure, none more impactful than the loss of his eye, is what has turned him into the monster that he is now. Viserys failed him, and Alicent tried to protect him, but she was simply no match for Viserys and his firstborn child. And this is also why I wasn't a fan of making Rhaenyra and Alicent close to the same age and best friends, because in the book, that's not the case. But, I digress. Anyway, next we see Corlys walk into the Great Hall on Dragonstone, and he stands over the painted table, seemingly deep in thought. He touches his hand of the Queen pin just as Rhaenyra and the rest of the counselors enter. They call for Sir Darkland, and Rhaenyra basically asks him to see if he can mount a dragon due to his distant relation to the Targaryens, blaming it on the fact that she has lost Princess Rhaenys and her dragon, that she holds an island seat with no land army, and that she is constantly told by her council that she herself cannot go to war lest she is slain or captured, thereby forfeiting that war. Now, Sir Darkland reminds Rhaenyra that she has Daemon and Caraxes and the Rivermen. Rhaenyra replies, that remains to be seen. She goes on to tell Sir Darkland that she must proceed as if she stands alone, and that the way forward is to somehow procure more dragon riders. Sir Darkland reminds Rhaenyra that Princess Rhaena is still without a dragon, but Corlys interjects, stating that Rhaena has tried before and failed with the dragons on the island. Lord Bartimaeus protests, citing the risks of such a venture. Now, Sir Darkland remarks that he is but a man and that the dragons are gods, but he agrees to try and mount Sea Smoke. Now, Rhaenyra does at least explain to Sir Darkland that she cannot compel him to attempt such a feat, reminding him that to claim a dragon, he must be willing to die. He tells Rhaenyra that he well understands the risks and that he gladly accepts them. reminding her that he swore to ward his queen with all his strength and give his blood for hers. Rhaenyra responds, "Then perhaps the gods will favor us." And see, this is why I keep telling people that the blacks are simply not a faction to support. Because Rhaenyra was laughably unprepared to assume her role as Queen of Westeros upon Viserys' death, especially given the fact that she knew her claim would be challenged years before he died. The fact that she only holds an island seat is entirely her fault because she left King's Landing for Dragonstone and essentially gave away home court to the Greens. And to make matters worse, instead of marrying someone in order to fortify her against exactly what's happening right now, she decided she wanted to be in these King's Landing streets and in the sheets with Sir Criston and Daemon. So now, here she is trying to manipulate distant Targaryens to get their ass eaten so that she can bolster her Air Force last minute. I mean, for all the black supporters, is this your queen? Like really? So, next we find Daemon, still at Harrenhal, getting his mind messed with, and he enters the throne room in King's Landing and finds his brother, Viserys, sitting on the Iron Throne, asking him if he said the infamous "Air for a Day" quote. Daemon insists that he can't still be upset about that, right? You know, Viserys goes on to state, for a second time, that his family was just destroyed, that he should have been at his side, meaning Daemon, but he instead chose to celebrate his own rise, laughing with the whores and lickspittles. Boy, that lickspittles word, that tickles me. But he goes on to reiterate that Daemon has no allies at court but him, that he has only ever defended him, but that everything he is given, he is thrown back in his face. Daemon looks to be getting emotional as Viserys goes on to disinherit him, declaring that Rhaenyra will be his new heir, and that he is to return to Runestone and his lady wife at once and without quarrel, before Daemon ultimately starts crying profusely. And Daemon backs away from the throne, and he actually backs away to the doors and tries desperately to open said doors and escape the throne room. Now finally the doors open into the small feasting hall at Harrenhal, and Sir Simon picks him up to his feet, asking if he might be of assistance. Now Daemon forces him deeper into the room, demanding to know what he's playing at. The other men at the table stand as if they're about to leave, but Daemon orders them to sit down. He then puts a knife to Sir Simon's throat and asks if he is the culprit that has been tampering with his peace. He wonders if Sir Simon might be a friend by day and a foe by night, that perhaps he resents Daemon's presence in the castle, that perhaps he is an agent of the Hightowers, or that maybe he is in league with Lord Larys, his nephew, or perhaps even Rhaenyra herself. Daemon then begins to laugh, but Sir Simon shushes him in an effort to try and calm him. Daemon tells Sir Simon that whatever his game is, that he, the king, is on his guard. Daemon then backs away from Sir Simon, exits the room, and continues down the hall. From there, we see him exiting the castle, checking out the Mosey Wosey, headed to the parking lot. But he passes by Alice Rivers and she asks, "You weren't going to bid me farewell?" Daemon tells her that there's something wrong with him, that someone has poisoned him, or that maybe it's the swamp air. Alice tells him that it's the ghost of Harren the Black, moaning his curses from Kingspire Tower. Daemon turns and shouts, "Drivel, all of it. The ghost, the curses, the blasted weirwood bed, I'm done with it." Alice remarks that this is Daemon's way, that when something displeases him, he simply runs, that he did so from Dragonstone, the Stepstones, Pentos, and now Harrenhal. Daemon tells Alice that he wakes and does not know where he's been. Alice tells him that there are older things in the world than he or her or living memory. She goes on to explain to Daemon that he is not the player, but a mere piece on the board, as is she. Daemon smiles and tells Alice that he is not like her. Alice remarks, "In some ways, no. You struggle to see. There is an anger that blinds you." Now Daemon tells Alice that Rhaenyra never even wanted the crown, that she spared it no thought. Alice explains that that's why Viserys gave it to her, that perhaps those who strive for it are the least suited to wear it. Daemon shouts, "Don't lecture me." Alice further explains that Viserys never wanted the crown either, that it came to him and he did his best, and that it's not a prize to be won, but a burden to bear. Now, Alice sits on a rock next to Daemon, and there's a brief silence. Now, Damon says to Alice, if you have any counsel for dealing with the River Lords, I'll be glad of it. Alice marvels at the sight of Daemon Targaryen asking for help. He corrects her, making it clear that he only seeks counsel. She explains that House Tully is not the largest house in the Riverlands, nor is it the richest, but that it's the most stable. That the Tully's wisdom has kept the river houses in line for centuries. That they would kill each other to the last man if it were not for their liege lord. Daemon remarks that old dote is of no use to them. Alice remarks that Lord Grover Tully is their Lord Paramount, and that without him they will never raise their banners as one. She goes on to explain that the rivermen are made of mud, and that they would rather die stuck in it than yield 1 inch to one another. Daemon interjects, then I can do nothing. And Alice responds, you? No. Just then, Alice holds out her arm, and an owl lands upon it. Daemon tells Alice that he needs help. She tells him to do nothing now, that in 2 days' time the winds will shift, and then she walks away. And look, I know all of us are growing tired of all the fever dreams that Daemon is experiencing since coming to Harrenhal, and I gotta bring up that the Harrenhal we got in Game of Thrones was not at all like this. I guess somebody forgot to pay the bill for the streaming service that provides all the nightmares. But these dreams have basically been Daemon coming to grips with all the bullshit he's perpetrated over the course of his life, and his coming to understand why. And though I could have certainly done without seeing him smash his mom, I think this season has been extraordinary character building for Daemon, assuming that the show will stick to the books and his time in this story is growing shorter and shorter by the episode. And I think these scenes have been the flourish needed to put a fine point on his character and his arc. Now, I'm not quite sure if we'll get to Daemon and Aemon's death by season's end. In fact, at this point, I'm pretty sure we won't. Because right now, I believe we're in 129 AC. And though it feels like a good ending spot for the season would have been the fall of King's Landing, that would mean that with only 2 episodes remaining in this shortened season, that a lot would still have to happen. And so at this point, I just don't think we're going to get that far. I do suppose that we could get there by next season's end, but then again, the pacing of the show has been like any other show that's come before it, in my opinion, so I can't really say how much longer we'll be with Daemon. I will say, though, that Matt Smith has done a rather good job playing the character, and I've enjoyed what he's done with Daemon, fever dreams and all. Anyway, from here we go back to Dragonstone, and we see Rhaenyra and crew standing at the top of the parking garage singing the dragon song. Kids Bop, right? With the Dragon Keepers while Sir Darkling stands at the ready. And after a while, Sea Smoke does indeed show up. Now, Sir Darkling, he's careful in attempting to mount him. But ultimately, he gets that ass warmed up like a Stouffer's microwave meal for his trouble. Like, it was pretty bad. And look, this was just a stupid and desperate move, in my opinion. And it is sure to continue to erode the faith that the other lords on the Black Council have in Rhaenyra's leadership. I personally think Rhaenyra lacked patience here, and also faith in the man that she, in all her infinite wisdom, decided to exile her first husband for so that she could marry in his stead. This just didn't have to happen now, from a character point of view. Now, from a writing standpoint, I know we need to both remind viewers just how dangerous it is to try and claim a dragon, because to this point, we've only really seen the successes, so we can get the actual dragon seeds and have there be that tension at the sowing. So narratively speaking, that's why it's there. But just from, like I said, from a character perspective, Rhaenyra is a shit decision maker, and I just want to state that again for the record. So next we go to Driftmark and we find Adam, of Hull, working on the ship anchored at the dock. His brother Alan doing the same nearby. Now, Corlys approaches Alan and expresses that he's pleased with the dock workers' progress. Alan tells him that their blockade is sure to be challenged either by the Lions or the Krakens, meaning the Lannisters, or the Greyjoys, and that the men will be glad to have him along with them. Now, Corlys tells Alan that he wishes for him to join him as his first mate. Alan remarks that he's grateful for the offer, but explains that there are more experienced men at his service. Now, Corlys explains that he was younger than Alan when he took his first command. He goes on to explain to Alan that he distinguished himself in the Stepstones, that he has the respect of the crew, and that he would be a fine choice for the post. Alan then asks Corliss if he is giving an order or making a request. Corliss kind of smirks and chuckles a bit, and then he tells Alan that he will expect him to report for his duties on tomorrow. And Alan responds, "As my lordship commands." And then Corliss departs as Adam looks on. And he kind of has a little jealous look on his face. Like, you don't never say nothing to me. So here we're basically watching Corliss get ready to set sail and join his blockade of King's Landing. And we see that he plans to take Alan with him. And we've also seen early in this episode that Aemon plans to enlist the Triarchy in helping deal with the said blockade. So you combine that with the fact that we'll surely get the sowing of the seeds in episode 7. And it's looking like, season 2 of this show may very well end with the Battle of the Gullet. Which could be kind of crunk if, Rook's Rest is any indication of what we can expect. Anyway, next we find Ulf the White sitting in an alehouse or a tavern, either or, with Diana, a servant girl, bringing him food. And it looks like it might be some kind of stew. But Ulf complains that the stew is a bit thin. Now, Diana tells him it's either that or the fish. Ulf complains again that there's nothing but fish in the city. Just then, Madame Sylvie orders a cup of ale. And Diana asks her if she would like anything to eat with that. And Madame Sylvie tells Diana that she doesn't think she could stomach it. Ulf remarks aloud to Madame Sylvie that she made the right choice. Now, Madame Sylvie goes on to explain to Diana aloud that the High Towers are banqueting in the castle while the small folk go without. Diana remarks that can't be true. Madame Sylvie goes on to proclaim that the High Towers are feasting every night in the Red Keep in celebration of the Prince Regent, that she knows because her girls have told her that they were paid well and fed well. She goes on to state that there were racks of lambs, mince pies, and honey cakes, beef and gravy, and there is to be another revel on the morrow. Now, Ulf remarks aloud that isn't right. Madame Sylvie apologizes for speaking so freely that her girls would never approve of her speaking about their bounty, even if it is true. Ulf explains that Viserys loved his feasts and his wine, but never while the small folk went without. Madame Sylvie agrees, but states that Viserys is gone now, with his rightful heir being denied her seat. Ulf takes a moment to think as Madame Sylvie remarks that there's no sense wondering what might have been, and she gets up and makes her way to the exit as Ulf decides ultimately not to eat his dinner. And, this is Masaria's plan at work. It's what she sent Lady Alinda to King's Landing to put into play. To turn the small folk against the High Towers in the hopes that there's a rebellion inside the city and the blacks can somehow take advantage of the chaos. Now, next we see Rhaenyra walking through the halls of Dragonstone with Lord Bartimaeus as he badgers her about Seasmoke having fled the Dragon Mount after Sir Stephen was killed. That it was all foreseeable. He goes on to remind her that he was in favor of treating with Lord Mouton to march on Rook's Rest, that it was the more conventional approach, less sensational. And at that point, Rhaenyra stops, she turns and slaps him across the face, causing him to stop speaking. She then remarks that it was her fault that he has forgotten to fear her, and then she storms off. And look, again, from a character's perspective, this was stupid. And I get that Rhaenyra is growing frustrated that the men on her council don't like to listen to her, but this is exactly the kind of thing that makes people betray you when the opportunity presents itself. Rhaenyra has to get a hold of herself, because she's already on thin ice with the lords on her council, and it's not just because she's a woman. It's because to this point in the war, they're losing, and they're losing bad. And everyone on her council understands that they're losing bad. And we know what Ned Stark and Jaime Lannister and Jon Snow even have all told us about how men's minds work during times of war. Hell, we watched Roose Bolton betray the hell out of Robb Stark once he had Jaime Lannister in hand because he felt the tide turning in the War of the Five Kings, that they were going to lose. So he took the opportunity to switch sides. And this decision may come back to haunt Rhaenyra at some point because it wasn't smart. Anyway, next we find Rhaenyra in the Dragonstone Library. She picks up a sword and points it through the air before walking around the room with it in hand. Mysaria enters, telling Rhaenyra that it was worth the risk no matter the outcome. Rhaenyra responds, "More good men killed." She then goes on to state that it was her fault. Mysaria reminds Rhaenyra that Sir Stephen went willingly. Rhaenyra remarks that it was a reckless thought that an ancient Valyrian beast would suffer a darkling to ride it. Mysaria asks, surely he was not the only possibility. Might there not be others among the highborn of the Seven Kingdoms? Rhaenyra asks, who would be so foolish as to try after hearing what befell Sir Stephen? Rhaenyra tells Mysaria that she will look again, but that the Darkling had the most likely claim. Mysaria tells Rhaenyra that there is good news to be had, that the small folk of King's Landing are listening, that they were ready enough to hear that the usurpers have abandoned them, that they are hungry and need someone to blame. Rhaenyra asks if it will be enough. Mysaria reminds her that they have laid the kindling only, that tonight they will light it and watch it begin to flare. Rhaenyra responds, and when it does, Aemon will put it down by force. Mysaria remarks that will only make it rise the hotter, that he cannot destroy his own city. Rhaenyra responds, neither can they overthrow them. Mysaria remarks, maybe not, but it is harder to wage war abroad when you must also keep peace at home. Rhaenyra responds, then let us see to our plan. She walks to the other side of the room, still clutching the sword. Mysaria notices and remarks, if I may, your grace, this becomes you. Rhaenyra smirks before putting the sword down on a nearby table and exiting the room. Now, from there we go back to King's Landing, and we see just how scarce food has become. A man buys the last of a merchant's wares, and Kat, wife of Hugh Hammer, approaches the merchant. He tells her that there isn't anything left. She claims that she's been waiting all day, that she'll take anything, even scraps. Just then, Hightower horses happen by with several wagons full of sheep, as Kat and everyone else in the marketplace look on. Ulf, seeing this, shouts, got enough sheep for your dragons then, but none for us. Where's our meat? We want meat. Now, at the Green Council, Lord Larys remarks that the small folk have become restless, that there is not enough food in the city, and that those with means have bought more than their fair share. Aemon responds, all the more reason Sir Tylan must break the blockade. Lord Larys remarks, meanwhile the people are hungry, and their anger is rising. He goes on to state that the enemy without may be fought with swords, but the enemy within is more insidious. Aemon asks why the small folk's anger is directed at them. He questions why it's not directed at the pretender who ordered the gullet closed in the first place. Lord Larys explains to Aemon that the people still look for him to ensure their well-being, that is the burden of authority. He goes on to state that he should not have to go it alone, that it occurs to him that he has not yet named a hand. He explains that Sir Criston served his brother, but that he needs one who may advance his cause. Aemon looks at Lord Larys and asks if he takes him for a fool. Lord Larys responds, on the contrary. Aemon tells him that he has little patience for the self-important and even less for flatterers and lick-spittles. He goes on to state that he is correct, that every king needs a hand, and that's why he will make it his responsibility to fetch Otto Hightower. That his grandsire may be overcautious, but that his devotion to his family has never been in doubt. He then tells Lord Larys to see it done. Now just then, Grand Maester Orwell enters, to which Aemon remarks, you're late. Grand Maester Orwell happily reports that the king regained consciousness if only for a few moments. Lord Weil reminds Grand Maester Orwell that he said there was little hope for the king's recovery. Grand Maester Orwell tells Lord Weil that the king is stronger than he thought, that his breath comes a little easier, that he may yet live. And Aemon remarks, what happy news. And this scene is really Lord Larys's play at trying to be chosen to be hand to the king. I think he's trying to show Aemon that he's smart, that he has his pulse, he has his finger on the pulse of the people, and that he can help Aemon in some ways that no one else can. And he's a good master of whispers now. He knows what's going on. I got to give him that. But I also think that Aemon goes, well, you don't even like your family, so much so that the word on the sidewalk is that you had them killed. And if you would kill your own family, then I can't trust you. And I think that's the route that Aemon's going. And he was never going to let Lord Larys be his hand to the king. And that's why I think he's smart to have Sir Otto be his hand, if he can even get word to Sir Otto and get him back to King's Landing. We'll have to wait and see how that works. Anyway, from there, we see Aegon laying in bed, groaning as the maesters remove his bandages. Now, Aemon enters, telling the maesters that he will see his brother. They all leave, and Aemon stands over his brother's bed and asks what he remembers. Aegon tells him that he remembers nothing. Now, Aemon presses on his wounds and tells him that he challenged Meleys and that it was foolish. Aegon again remarks that he remembers nothing. Aemon leans over and kisses his brother's forehead just as Grand Maester Orwell enters. He tells Aegon that he is in the most capable hands before placing Aegon's marble of office in his hand, and he walks towards the door. But once he gets near Grand Maester Orwell, he stops and says, "It looks like my brother has a long recovery ahead of him. See that he is made to rest comfortably," and then he exits the room. And look, this was Aemon going to check on his brother's physical state and the state of his memory. And I think Aegon was really smart here because I think he remembers exactly what happens at Rook's Rest. But he knows that if he tells Aemon that he remembers what he did, especially while he's in such a vulnerable state, that Aemon will turn up the volume on the whole, "I want to do my brother." Especially if he has the opportunity to do so where he can do it without directly having been blamed for it. I think that Aemon meant for Aegon to die at Rook's Rest. I think he saw an opportunity to get Aegon out of the way. And so he was, I'll just let him go fight Meleys, and, he dies at Rook's Rest, I become king. Because remember, Aegon didn't really want to be king. They dragged him to the altar and forced him to put that crown on his head. But, Aemon has wanted to be king much more than Aegon, ever did. And this goes back to what Alice Rivers was just telling Damon about how the people who want the crown are typically least suited to wear it. That it's not a prize to be won, it's a burden to bear. And so I think that's kind of one of the themes that's kind of floating through the episode here. And, I gotta say that while Aegon is laid up, that Aemon might well have killed his brother right there in the bed if Grand Maester Orwell had not showed up, and if there was not a Kingsguardsman standing at the door. But I mean, Aemon is literally trying to figure out how to get in that ass while being able to maintain plausible deniability. So Aegon, my man, you better watch your back. No naps, no nothing, my boy. Stay vigilant. But next we see Rhaena walking in the Vale with Joffrey, and she's telling him that there is nothing to be gained with fretfulness, that not all of them are called to great deeds, that some of them must serve in smaller ways, even if they are not what they would themselves choose. And at that point, they come across several sets of blackened sheep skeletons. And as the camera kind of widens and pans up, we see that the dead sheep have indeed been burned and eaten to the bone by a dragon. We then see Rhaena sitting in a room inside the castle with Viserys II and Aegon III as they play with both real baby dragons and toy dragons. Lady Jane enters and brings the good news that Prince Reggio has answered her letter and that he will be most pleased to shelter Rhaenyra's youngest sons in Pentos as well as their half-sister. Rhaena does not speak. Jane then enters the room, remarking that she thought Rhaena would at least be happy, or at the least less morose, because, it's clear that she hates it there. And Rhaena claims to Jane that she misled her, that there is indeed a large dragon in the Vale. The Lady Jane tells Rhaena that the rumor of it began shortly after the war, that her maester surmised that the dragon was ranging more broadly for food. She goes on to state that it is large and formidable, but alas, it's wild. She then tells Rhaena that a merchant cog, the Gay Abandon, will take her to Pentos and that she will send 6 good men to protect them on the crossing before exiting the room. And, here, the dragon in mention is Sheep Stealer. Hence all the dead sheep. It was kind of on the nose, right? And I believe I mentioned in the previous videos that we haven't seen Nettles yet. And since we have seen all the other major dragon scenes to this point, I surmise that we will not see Nettles at all. And now I know why. It's because the writers have plans for Rhaena to claim Sheep Stealer instead. I don't know if I like that move yet or not, because I think that Daemon had a thing with Nettles in the book at some point before he died, and obviously that part of Nettles' story won't be absorbed by Rhaena. Please, Lord. And so I guess I'll withhold judgment until I see exactly where the storyline involving Rhaena and Sheep Stealer is headed. So next we go back to Driftmark and we see Alan and Adam inside their home. Now Adam tells Alan that he's not fooling anyone, explaining to him that Lord Corliss has chosen to raise him up to serve alongside him, yet he still continues to subterfuge. He tells Adam that he doesn't want Corliss to get the wrong idea. Adam asks about what? Adam looks at his brother before remarking that he's just like Corliss. Alan laughs before remarking that Adam makes an art of provoking him. Adam reminds Alan that he saved Corliss's life and asks if he never thinks about what could be theirs, the riches, the servants, and even the driftwood throne. Hint, hint. Alan reminds Adam that they have spent their whole lives in the shadow of the sea snake's great castle, that he does not wish to dwell on it any longer. Adam tells Alan that he belittles his great opportunities while he himself is ignored. Alan tells Adam that the sea snake would rather see high tide claimed by the sea than call them his sons, so he should stop wasting his life for something that will never come. And of course, if you've kept up with any of this story at all, then you know that both Alan and Adam will eventually be legitimized Valerians. Alan will become the next Lord of the Tides, and Adam will become a knight and ride sea smoke. Remember, Bela told her grandsire that Driftmark needed to go with someone who was salt and sea for its heir. And Alan fits that mold perfectly from what the show has shown us to this point. So next we find Rhaenyra standing outside on her balcony and Jacaerys stops by. He tells his mother that it was a bold attempt, that he admires her for it. And by it, he means the whole Sir Darkland fiasco. R.I.P. Stefan. He tells her that he heard she struck Lord Baltimus and that the household is abuzz of it. Rhaenyra remarks that he's lucky she did not have his tongue. Jacaerys then asks what he said that was so deserving. She tells him that she's tired of being protected. She remarks that she reminds them too much of their mothers and daughters, that they must see her as a ruler, that the symbols of authority are not jewels in a gown, but instead the shield and the sword. She says this as she refuses to let her son do any of the fighting, but okay. Jacaerys remarks that his ruler is his mother and that he does not wish it otherwise. He then asks if she will lead them to war herself. She remarks that she cannot wait there on Dragonstone, pacing the floor, waiting for defeat and despair to visit her. Jacaerys tells her not to be ridiculous. Rhaenyra explains that she is doing all she can, that she has directed Lord Mooten to march on Rook's Rest. Jacaerys states that they may marshal the strength of the Vale, Maidenpool, and all their allies besides, but that they will still never match the strength of the Green armies. He goes on to tell Rhaenyra that they need Daemon and his dragon. Rhaenyra asks if she may be free for 1 hour without the constant refrain of Daemon, Daemon, Daemon. Just then, a Queen's Guardsman interrupts, announcing that the Lady Massaria has arrived. And she tells Rhaenyra that their gift has been sent. Jacaerys, confused, asks, what gift? Rhaenyra responds, let us hope for black clouds over the Blackwater tonight. Jacaerys, still confused, simply walks off. And look, I'm so tired of hearing Rhaenyra whine about having to hear from the other lords on her council about Daemon, because look, this is exactly what you married him for, his military strength. But you're mad now because you can't seem to control him. And look, Rhaenyra's incompetence has been on full display this season, because I bet if Laenor was still here, shit wouldn't be this bad. You would have had someone with military experience, also a dragon rider, who could lead an army, and then you wouldn't have your entire war effort be dependent upon someone who isn't dependable. See how that works? Anyway, next we see the people on the beach of King's Landing digging for clams, and probably other things that they might eat, I suppose, when one of them sees a boat with Rhaenyra's banner. Now, he walks over to it and he checks the boat, and it's full of food. Then he looks out and he sees several more boats just like it, washing in from Blackwater Bay. Now, from there, we find Alicent sitting in Aegon's room as he struggles to breathe. Grand Maester Orwell enters and Alicent asks, you said he'd improve. Grand Maester Orwell tells her that the king sleeps 9 hours of every 10, that he did open his eyes and speak, however briefly, that his mending may be long and painful, but that it is his sincere hope that his grace will be spared. My man better wake up. Stay vigilant. Allison asks what he will be if he lives. Grand Maester Orwell simply bows and moves to exit the room. Allison then asks of her letters to her father. Grand Maester Orwell tells her that he has sent ravens to High Garden and to Old Town and to all the great houses in the Reach, but that there has been no word from Sir Otto as of yet. He tells her that there is war in the Reach now, that House Beesbury has raised arms against the Hightower host over the killing of their lord. You might remember Lord Beesbury died when Sir Criston smashed his head into his marble of office in the Green Council meeting right after Viserys died. Consequences. Anyway, Alicent returns to her son's bedside, caressing his hand as she apologizes to him over and over. And again, like I said, I'm getting the feeling that we might not see Otto Hightower again. Now, in the books, he does. He's in King's Landing when the fall of King's Landing happens, and he's beheaded for treason. But I get the feeling that the writers are trying to just kind of write him off the show, and they bring up the whole war against House Beesbury to maybe make a reason for why Otto is never kind of seen or heard from again. I don't know that that's what's happening, but keep in mind we haven't heard a lick from him since he was shooed away by Aegon. And so with 2 episodes left, I'm starting to think we won't hear from him. But I guess we'll have to kind of see. We next see Alicent exiting the castle as Hightower men prepare once again to march off to war. So Gawain calls out to her, and she claims that it is well that she found him, that she wishes to give him her blessing. Now, he looks surprised, but he thanks her before returning to his horse. She then asks him if he's heard from their father, that she has sent ravens to High Garden and to Old Town with no reply. So Gawain tells her that he has heard nothing, but that he has not sent any letters, reminding Alicent that if their father were to write to anyone, that it would be her, that she was always his favorite. Alicent remarks that it is strange that there has been no word. So Gawain reminds Alicent that Otto Hightower is ever resourceful and that he will send news when there is news to send. Alicent wonders what might have been if Sir Otto had brought Gawain to court instead of her. Gawain reminds her that he was the oldest son and that it was right that he was raised at Old Town. Alicent remarks that he was 8 years old and motherless, that it must have been difficult. Gawain responds, "You get on with it, don't you, when there isn't any other choice." Alicent asks Gawain what her son Darren is like. So Gawain asks if he writes to her. She tells Sir Gawain that he writes less and less these days. So Gawain tells Alicent that he is 16 now, and that perhaps letters hold less of his interest. He tells Alicent that her son is stalwart and clever, and that he is adept with his lute as he is with his sword. And a feature in the fancies of many young ladies, he surmises. He tells Alicent that he's kind, and she replies, "That's good." She tells Sir Gawain that kindness is a quality that she has found lacking in his brothers. Sir Gawain tells Alicent that she did well to send him to ward in Old Town, that the Red Keep may be less than a salubrious environment for the forming of a young man. Alicent asks if it was the court or their mother. So Gawain remarks that he is sure that Alicent did her best. He then looks across the courtyard and he sees Sir Criston on his horse, and he tells Alicent that he must join him. He asks that she wish him luck. She tells him that she shall pray to the warrior for his safe return. He then bids her farewell and mounts his horse. So Criston looks at Alicent from across the courtyard before turning and headed out the gate. And look, spoiler alert, I don't think she's ever going to see him again. Or her brother. Not alive, anyway. You can tell by the dialogue between her and Sir Gawain that this is probably going to be the last time they ever speak in person. In screenwriting, if the scene is written well, you can feel a goodbye. And I think you're supposed to. I think Sir Otto may have been got, like I said, too. As I stated in an earlier video this season, when he last spoke to Alicent before Aegon fired him his hand to the king and shooed him off, that scene also felt like a goodbye. And I know, like I said again, I'll reiterate, in the book, Sir Otto is the one who brokers the deal with the Triarchy. But here in the show, that duty has fallen on Sir Tylan, so he doesn't have to do that here. And again, I'll say, in the book, from what I understand, Sir Otto is in King's Landing when Rhaenyra and Daemon attack on Dragonback, and Sir Otto is ultimately beheaded for treason. But again, with Otto having nothing left to do from a narrative standpoint, in the show, I really do wonder if we'll ever see him again on House of the Dragon. But next we find Helena in her quarters feeding crickets, some kind of bugs. Might be a Westerosi sand cricket. I don't know. But Allison appears and she remarks, and Helena remarks that one of them has stopped singing. Allison then asks Helena to join her in lighting a candle in the Grand Sept for Aegon and all their lost souls. From there, we see Hugh Hammer walking through the streets of King's Landing. He bends down to pet a dog when he sees people running around with food. He stands and he stops a man asking where he got the sack of food from. The man tells him that he got it from one of Rhaenyra's ships. So Hugh follows the mob down to another area, I'm assuming closer to the beach, and he ultimately beats the man up and takes the food that he himself had procured, which was kind of messed up. But I guess, your family got to eat. I mean, that's what people would do, right? If you're in a position to take from somebody, you probably do it. Now, inside the Sept, as Allison and Helena light these candles, a member of the Kingsguard comes in and tells them that they must leave now. And as they exit the Sept, they find that the small folk are in a frenzy outside, and the King's Guardsman tells the others to get the queens to the wheelhouse. Allison grabs for Helena's hand, and the pair set out for said wheelhouse as the King's Guardsmen and the Goldcloaks attempt to keep the mob at bay. Now, as they move down the steps of the Sept, a member of the mob shouts, "'Tis the Queen of Fishes," and he throws, I guess that's a fish, at Allison, hitting her in the face. And the King's Guardsmen tell everyone to keep moving, and the group continues as someone shouts, "Long live Rhaenyra." Now, at this point, Allison and Helena are separated, and Allison calls out to her but then falls down as the guards continue to surround the pair. They help Allison back onto her feet as a man grabs her by the arm, and the King's Guardman cuts his hand off before Allison can stop him. But in the immediate aftermath of said event, she commands the guards to sheath their swords. The small folk witness the man's maiming and become even more enraged. Helena finally reaches Allison's position and the pair run as the mob gives chase. They become trapped momentarily, pinned against one of the buildings outside the Sept, but they manage to escape as the guards continue fighting the angry townspeople. Now, as Allison and Helena do eventually make it to the wheelhouse, Allison looks back and sees several King's Guardsmen being beaten and even killed by the angry mob. Finally, Allison gets inside with Helena, but the people jump on top of the cart trying to get inside the wheelhouse, and it's only after the cart begins to move that the women are finally taken to safety. And this scene reminds me of one of the scenes in season 2 of Game of Thrones when Joffrey sent Marcella off to, Tyrion sent Marcella off to Dorne. And on the way back to the Red Keep, Joffrey got hit in the face with a cow pie because the people were hungry and then was set upon by an angry mob. It had the same exact energy, in fact, and this was a scene that we saw in the first trailer that got released for the show months back. And upon first watch, I wondered if this might have been the fall of King's Landing, making me wonder if the show would get that far in just this in one season. But now that I've seen what it actually is, combined with the shortened episode count, as I've stated before, I'm pretty sure we won't get that far this season. Next, we find Aegon in bed, the left side of his face and body badly burnt, as he struggles to breathe. And we see that Lord Larys is there with him. We see a handmaid trying to give Aegon what I can only assume is milk of the poppy. And when Lord Larys interjects and states, "No more." The handmaid tells him that Grand Maester instructed her to give him the remedy. Lord Larys explains that the king will be most eager for his draught in an hour. The handmaid bows and hands Lord Larys the bottle before leaving the room. And Lord Larys approaches Aegon's bed, explaining that the drink takes the pain away, but that it also dulls the mind. He goes on to tell Aegon that he has already written himself into legend, that he survived Dragonfire, but that he will never be whole. He tells him that Orwell has exhausted his capabilities, that he has bound his leg, but that he will never run again. He goes on to explain to Aegon that his mind is all that remains of him. He recalls that he came screaming into the world in one of Harren's great towers at Harrenhal, that his lungs were strong, but that his foot was so twisted that his father named it sorcery, causing a member of their household to be accusing a member of their household to be casting malign spells. He tells Aegon that people will pity him, either behind his back or in his presence, that they will stare at him or turn away, and that they will underestimate him, that this will be his advantage. He informs Aegon that his brother rules in his place now, and that means his life is in danger. Aegon then whispers to Lord Larys, "Help me." And like I told you guys earlier in this video, Aemon is trying to figure out how to kill his brother without getting blamed for it. And I think that's also what he was trying to do at Rook's Rest, when he took his first shot. And that's what Lord Larys means about his life being in danger. And as I told you guys, Aegon is going to have to keep his head on the swivel. And that means he can't be taking a whole bunch of milk of the poppy. He going to have to grill that pain up and eat it if he wants to stay alive and reclaim the throne at some point, which, given how the book goes, I'm certain that he will. Now, from there, we find Daemon at Harrenhal, and he's watching Viserys cry over Queen Emma's dead body. But this time, Daemon goes to him and offers him comfort. Viserys cries in his arms as Daemon remarks, "I'm sorry. You needed me. I'm here now." He is then awakened by Simon in the small hall and told that Lord Grover Tully has died and that Lord Oscar Tully is now Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Daemon asks what the manner of Lord Grover's passing was, so Simon tells him that he had been ill for some time, that the Riverland Maesters had been at their wits' end, but Alice Rivers volunteered her renowned skills, that she plied her craft, but that there was no more to be done. Now, upon hearing this, Daemon begins to cry as Sir Simon exits the room. And I suppose the writers showed us both this scene and the vision before it to imply that Daemon has indeed undergone the transformation of sorts that he's set out to get this season, that he gets it now. And I assume that's what this whole, like I said, his whole arc this season was supposed to be about, for his character to go from being a selfish, self-serving man in pursuit of what he believes to be his birthright to more of a team player fighting for Rhaenyra's right to the throne because it's the right thing to do. Now, you guys know I disagree with the idea that the throne somehow belongs to Rhaenyra, even with her father decreeing it so. But if you're Daemon, from a character standpoint, and Rhaenyra is your wife, I do think for him, he should be fighting for her instead of with her. So on that grounds, I kind of approve of the character's arc this season. So next we find Adam on the beach fishing or doing something to that effect when sea smoke appears in the distance. But as the dragon gets closer, he makes a turn and makes its way towards the beach, scaring off the fisherman and Adam alike. And Adam begins to run. He runs into the forest and the beast gives chase. And finally, it corners Adam against a rock, approaching him as he trembles with fright. And, I was wondering what the writers were going to do to make the whole dragon seed thing plausible for the blacks, especially after the death of Sir Darkland. And I guess this was it. I think I would have preferred Adam be drawn to sea smoke somehow and having him have to earn the right to ride the dragon. But instead, the writers went with this. They basically have the dragon show up where Adam is and bend his neck to him without him having to go through any kind of ordeal in order to earn the right to ride said dragon. I didn't like this, though I suppose it's the faster of the two ways. I say boo. Now, from there, we find Rhaenyra back on Dragonstone, and Mysaria is telling her that her banners were carried from the ships into the sea, that they went as far as the gates of the Red Keep before they were turned away. She explains that Rhaenyra should see it as a warning to the usurpers that she has strength beyond what they accredited. Rhaenyra tells Mysaria that she doesn't think she can win this war. Mysaria claims that she is just tired. Rhaenyra laments that her own son does not believe in her capabilities, that he thinks she needs Daemon at her side. Mysaria explains that Daemon has only ever done what suits Daemon. Rhaenyra recalls that Daemon was everything that she wanted to be, that he was carefree and dangerous, that he was a man. She goes on to explain that she was what he wanted, cherished by Viserys and made his heir. That they were two halves of a whole, but that Daemon has never been at peace, that he wishes to possess her but not be possessed himself. And that to now see her finally take hold of all that he believed to be his, she fears what he might do, that he may have turned against her. And I guess I could understand her thinking that he won't answer his mail. Mysaria then explains that it is more Daemon's way to disappear. Rhaenyra explains that in either case she has lost him and Caraxes along with him. She explains that Rhaenys and her dragon are both dead, that she only has Syrax and two young beasts, that they cannot take on Vhagar alone. She continues that she has no army. Mysaria explains that she has the Valerian fleet and the men who fight in it, and Rhaenyra doesn't think it's enough. She tells Massaria that even if they somehow prevail, that she wonders how she would rule the kingdom when her own son doubts her. And Massaria remarks, "You have me." And Rhaenyra responds, "And you have my thanks, truly." And after a brief silence, Massaria says that it was her father who had his pleasure with her when she was still a child. Oh boy. And that after many months, she became pregnant with his child. She tells Rhaenyra that she bears a scar as well, that she can no longer bear children. She recalls that her father left her for dead, but that she lived. She explains that after that, she swore she would never trust another, and that oath has served her well. She explains that the world is cold and cruel, and that there are few in it who are steadfast. She tells Rhaenyra that she thinks she is steadfast, that she has seen her as worthy, as an equal even, and that because of that fact, she will serve her because she believes she is meant to be queen. Now, Rhaenyra then approaches Massaria and she hugs her, and Massaria hugs her in return, and after a few moments, the pair get closer as they continue their embrace, and eventually they kiss rather passionately. Now, the kiss is broken up when Sir Marbrand enters, informing Rhaenyra that sea smoke had been spotted flying over Spicetown with a rider. Rhaenyra asks who the rider is, and Sir Marbrand tells her that it is impossible to tell from the ground. Massaria asks if it could be one of the Greens, and Rhaenyra doesn't know who else it could be. Sir Marbrand asks if he should summon the council. Rhaenyra doesn't respond, she just exits the room. We then see her walking through the castle with some haste out to the parking garage, and she gets on Syrax and she flies off as Jacaerys walks out after her, no doubt wondering where the hell she's going now. She always leaving, not telling nobody where she going. Rhaenyra then leaves Dragonstone, headed towards Driftmark, as the episode cuts to black. Now, look, I was fine with the scene between Rhaenyra and Massaria this episode. In fact, I was fine with all the scenes that they've had this season, as I have rather enjoyed watching them get closer. But them becoming sexual ruins the entire thing. First of all, the kiss comes out of nowhere, and it's not as if Rhaenyra has ever shown herself to be anything other than straight. She even says as much during season 1 when she and Sir Laenor took their walk on the beach on Driftmark while their parents were inside the Hall of Nine negotiating their betrothal. You know, she talked about how they had different tastes, you know, and I get it. This is the writers trying to give Rhaenyra a feminist gal pal, right? Somebody that she can have her feminist confab with. She's so tired of sitting in meetings with a bunch of men who underestimate her at every turn. So giving her a female with whom she can talk to and ultimately steer the war from the Black's perspective provides a sort of balance for her. But then my question simply becomes, why would you choose that person to be intimate with? The one woman on her council, unofficially, but still on her council, who has shown herself to have enough power to make things happen all the way in King's Landing without even having to be there. A woman that, if you were to, let's say, go back to Daemon once he gets done soul searching and he comes back to you, could become a powerful enemy of yours and help turn the tide of the war against you all over again. And keep in mind, she's actually slept with Daemon too. This is super messy. And this is yet another stupid decision that Rhaenyra makes this episode. And by my count, that's three. Three inexplicable decisions that just kind of show you that she's just not meant to be in charge of anyone, man. Sleeping with important members of your council is supremely dumb. And we have literally seen the mess that was made by Sir Criston and Alicent doing exactly that, even though the men didn't really want her on the council. But still, it's driven a wedge between them that has greatly contributed to the Green Council becoming a little bit of a mess. There are other things that are going on there too, but that hasn't helped. And it's also made watching the pair of them in scenes together pretty difficult as of late. This is just one more thing that makes me sure that Rhaenyra will lose this war, and moreover that she would be a horrible queen, because I'm just like, she doesn't think about things. She just does stuff. So look, this was certainly one of the lesser episodes of this season, and I think of the show in its totality. Not because of the same-sex kiss alone, but also because this episode was longer than it needed to be. they're making the episodes run extremely long for no reason, it seems. And I didn't like when Game of Thrones started running fewer episodes with longer runtimes in the last 2 seasons either. But yeah, I don't like this. I think that when you start messing with the show's episode count, you ultimately affect the pacing in a way that becomes noticeable to the audience, and it kind of gives you the viewers a kind of jet lag. I myself would rather have 10 episodes of content every season, even if an episode or two runs past the typical 45 minutes or so per. I think if we had 2 more episodes, we could have gotten the Battle at the Burning Mill, which I already told you guys I would have very much liked to see. And I've wondered ever since I saw this season of the show, and that it would only have 8 episodes, where the showrunners would decide to end the season. I've always said to people, I will decide how good or how bad this season was, and it all depends on where the season ends. Because I kind of know the story, at least the broad strokes. So where the story ends, whether or not they stop at a good place or not. And as I've stated earlier, I wondered if this season would get to the fall of King's Landing. But again, where we stand now with just 2 episodes to go, the Battle of the Gutted feels like the place where the show will take its pause and prepare for the next season. And we maybe won't even get to the actual battle itself, which I gotta say will be a real letdown. Seriously, I hope we get to see the battle in the season finale. Like, writers, showrunners, don't let me down here. But the show is starting to drift, in my opinion, and it's drifting farther and farther away from what happened in the books. And having watched Game of Thrones do this same thing and seeing how it went when it departed from George R.R. Martin's text, I'm becoming more nervous about exactly what the writers in this super woke era of television and filmmaking have decided to do moving forward here. I mean, the Valerians are black. It didn't make any sense. But all right, I think it really impacted Rhaenyra's character in a way that made her look stupid and incompetent as opposed to just reckless, but fine, right? Now, Rhaenyra and Alicent were not the same age, not even close, and they weren't even friends in the book, which makes it a little easier to understand how they could end up on opposite sides of this particular conflict. But they changed that to, all right, I'm gonna let you do your thing. Nettles is not included in the characters that are dragon seeds, and that may have some fairly important implications as the story moves into next season, but I guess, again, we'll have to wait and see. I just hope that the writers are not about to pull a Game of Thrones here, because I swear for Lord, if that happens, it's going to be really difficult to get me to invest in any more HBO-produced George R.R. Martin shows. The way I see it, you fool me once, shame on me. You fool me twice, I cancel HBO. But what do you guys think? Did you guys enjoy the 6th episode of this season? What's your favorite storyline so far? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. I'll catch y'all on the next video.